Welcome, everybody. This episode of the Dealmakers is brought to you by the House Cats Podcast Network, a home for sharp conversations. We also try to include a little local perspective and stories that actually understand the markets, the communities, and the people behind the deal. So today, we're going to talk about spring. We are not talking about generic spring real estate conversational stuff, not the national headline version. This is not just listed in April and, let's let the market do the work. Because right now around the Chesapeake Bay, spring helps, but it doesn't save you. And this is the part that sellers need to understand in 2026. The yard might look better. The water might look better. The photos are going to feel warmer. Buyers are going to be a little bit more active. But if the price is wrong, and the house feels like work, if that payment doesn't make sense, or if the buyer's still got some unanswered questions about insurance or condition, septic, shoreline, permits, or whatever they are actually taking on, spring is not going to fix that. So in this episode, we're breaking down what actually moves a house in Maryland and around the Chesapeake Bay region this spring. We're also going to break down why Maryland is not simply one market. It's probably one of the more diverse marketplaces there is in terms of United States real estate. We're going to talk about why Arundel County, Queen Anne's, Talbot, Calvert, Annapolis, Kent Island, and all the Eastern Shore stuff. Every seller needs a little bit different strategy. We're going to talk about why pricing to that 2026 reality is going to matter a lot more than pricing to that 2022 memory. We're going to talk about why presentation is not just about pretty photos. It is about reducing buyer risk. And why the strongest sellers in the spring market are not just selling the house, they are selling the cleanest version of yes. Because in the spring market of 2026, the winners are not the sellers who simply show up during the peak season. The winners are the sellers who launch with discipline, timing, pricing, presentation, documentation, terms. That's what's going to create momentum. And around the Chesapeake Bay, houses do not move just because the calendar says it's spring. They move when the lifestyle is compelling, the numbers make sense, and the buyer has enough confidence to say, yes, let's get into it. So here's something that sellers don't always really want to hear. Most people think that when they list their house in the spring, it's going to make a huge difference. It's a huge advantage. And oftentimes it can feel like that. It can feel almost like if you're, a sports nerd, home field advantage, right? You'd rather have it than not, right? The weather gets better. The yard's looking better. Waterfront property shows better. There's more nostalgia about getting back out on the water. Buyers are thinking about summertime. They're talking about school year timing, lifestyle, moving before the fall, getting settled before Labor Day. And quite honestly, it's one of the best times to live around the Chesapeake Bay. So whether you're in Annapolis or in a park, Edgewater, or over on the other side of the bridge in the Eastern Shore area, or even Baltimore and everything that Howard County has with Columbia and Elk Ridge and Ellicott City. I mean, living in Maryland in this late spring to summer to early fall season, I mean, it really doesn't get a whole lot better. It's fantastic. There's so much stuff to do. But despite having all of that, when it comes to real estate, home field advantage, if that's what we want to call it, it's not going to fix a bad game plan. Okay. It's not going to fix overpricing. It's not going to fix a weak presentation or a lazy presentation. And it's not going to fix deferred maintenance or confusion around, does this property have flood insurance issues? Does the septic work? Is there shoreline erosion that's going on? Is the dock in good shape? It doesn't look like anybody's used it in 10 years. Is the work permitted? It looks fresh, but I don't see any permits. Monthly payments, certainly a big one. Having a game plan will make the difference between feeling like you're winning and making sure that you're squeezing every dollar out of your investment. Spring will give you attention, but it's not going to give you trust. And in this market, especially around the greater Annapolis space in Maryland, trust is what is going to move houses. The old playbook was pretty simple, right? List it in the spring, create some urgency, let the buyers compete. And that worked when the market was doing a lot of the work. It worked during the pandemic times when people were happy if some place had 4 walls, right? The payment was low enough for people to feel like we can do this and we can fix it up and make it our own. But in 2026, that playbook has to be different. The launch has to be considered a launch of a product, and you have to price it to today's market, not, the market that you think it could be, not the market that it was a few years back. Price it to today's market. You got to remove that buyer friction, make the decision making easy for them, because this spring in particular, houses are not moving simply because they are a new listing coming on at the right time. They are moving if the fundamentals surrounding that house eliminate the objections that a buyer would have. Let's talk about a little bit of the variations in the market before we get into some of the minutia and some of these details. Okay. Maryland, this is a pretty important thing. And I think a lot of people that do live in Maryland understand that there's certainly different demographics all over the place. It's pretty diverse in terms of what each area offers within it. It's one of the only states in the union that has a combination of mountains, beaches, plains, farms, waterways that are creeks to rivers to lakes to the Atlantic Ocean. I mean, it literally has a little bit of everything for everybody. It experiences all 4 seasons every single year. And as most Marylanders will tell you, the weather can be rather unpredictable. Being around DC, for the most part, kind of insulates this region from a lot of different economic woes, let's say, that other states will incur, because we have really a whole lot of military bases that are around the region and administrations that are constantly coming and going. And because of all that activity at all times, it really kind of keeps real estate level, right? So it doesn't really have a big drop-offs and dips one way or another, 2000 withstanding. This is going to sound a little obvious, but Maryland is not one market. It is a hyper local market, and that really goes from town to town, and also communities, sellers sometimes to their own benefit and sometimes to the agent's detriment will do a lot of research into real estate, right? And they'll read a national headline or even something in a regional newspaper. Like for instance, for us, it would be the Baltimore Sun or the Capital Gazette on top of the Washington Post, the Wall Street Journal, New York Times. We get people that are actually pretty well informed on what the national headlines are, but that doesn't mean that that same sentiment from those reports, assuming that those reports are accurate, are things that are going to translate into your local market and particularly your house in general. So I think that's an important note that kind of gets lost with some sellers. I think it goes unspoken, but it's obvious. I'm just going to say it. A home in Annapolis is not going to be marketed the same way as a home in Kent Island, which is not going to be marketed the same way as a waterfront property in Edgewater, which is not going to be marketed the same way as a townhouse property in Crofton, which is not going to be marketed the same way as a Severna Park move-up home, right? So Southern Maryland in general is not going to be the same as what the Eastern Shore gets. And they're both kind of rural markets for the most part, and a little bit of a throwback in that respect, but they're two very different things. They're two different animals. And I think your approach has to be different to each as a listing agent. And that is who's going to be dealing with these sellers in those cases, right? So same state, the properties can be identical, They could be waterfront properties that have a pier. They got some shoreline protection, flood zone questions that are easily answerable, septic in great shape, well water in great shape, critical area considerations for both properties, but they can't be judged in the same way as they would be, because they're not in the same exact pocket of the market. So hopefully that makes sense. Same state, different games, different buyers, different objections, different leverage. And you're also attracting different clientele to each different property. And I think there's a fine line to walk as a listing agent when it comes to who are we preparing for, because it is a guess, but it's an educated guess based on experience and based on the data that you have available. Here's the median income for the region, so you're likely to attract somebody that has a similar income. Here's the median household makeup. You're likely to attract somebody that is going to meet those criteria. And then also having agents, listing agents in particular, call around if they have a listing that's coming up, and call around to the previous or the active listings and get an idea from those listing agents what their feedback has been from their activity, what kind of buyers were coming through their property if they've already sold, what kind of feedback were they getting about either the market in general or the house, because you're likely to get the same objections, you're likely to get the same type of feedback. And it's nice if you have the ability to, and time is on your side, to go and collect that feedback as a seller's agent and make those objections go into your listing, understanding those are probably going to be the similar objections to what we'll get. Is there any way for us to mitigate those? And that way you're casting a wider net. You're hopefully cutting down your days on market. It may require an investment in either your landscaping, your curb appeal, or upgrades, renovations to the property. Some of them might not be sexy. It might be, hey, we might have to replace the septic. That's not something that everybody wants to do. Why would I want to make improvements to a house that I could have made them for myself? I get it. This happens all the time with us. It really does. But you're trying to eliminate objections. And if you have the financial wherewithal to do that, you should try to do that, because it is going to move your property quicker, which means you are going to be paying less in your holding cost. You're also going to be you're really going to be netting the most amount of money for the property because it's moving quickly. Because it's moving quickly, you're likely attracting 1, 2 more than that, maybe, offers, which means that net may very well go up, or if it's not going up in terms of a net value, it might also eliminate contingencies, which makes the deal stronger and more likely to close. And when that happens, that is, while it might not be a financial gain, it is certainly a mental fortitude, right? It is something that is going to give you confidence as a seller that once I sign this contract, it is going to be done. I don't have to worry about anything. So areas that we will typically operate in right now are, I would say a lot of our business is going to be in Annapolis and Arundel County. We do frequent Kent Island in the Queen Anne's County market quite a bit. That's everything that is right on immediately on the other side of the Bay Bridge. We have clients who want to go and explore some of the markets that are maybe an hour over the bridge, and those are really surrounding they're in Talbot County, but they really kind of surround the triangle. It's kind of what we call it. It's Easton, St. Michael's, and Oxford. Each of those towns certainly going to give you a different vibe, pluses and minuses to everything. But those buyers that we get for those markets are typically looking for a lifestyle change. Life does move a little bit slower there. It's pretty big in the second home market as well. So if we have affluent clients that are looking for some kind of retreat, that is a big draw for them. We also dive into Calvert County, a little bit St. Mary's County, and sometimes Charles County. And that's what we're going to be dubbing Southern Maryland. So you ever hear us talking about Southern Maryland? That's what that is. We do those, I would say, again, probably about the same amount that we get those second home buyers that are looking over on the Eastern Shore. We will get a similar amount of buyers that are usually military working at one of the bases that are there. We have several of them. You're definitely going to be in a little bit cheaper of a price point. That's a good thing for a lot of people. It's certainly more affordable. Your dollar stretches further. You have to drive a little bit more to get around, especially if you're trying to, commute towards DC or towards up towards Annapolis or Baltimore, but your money stretches way further in Southern Maryland. I'm not sure how much longer that will be, but it is certainly an emerging market, and it also has a ton of history with it too. So it's a market that we like being a part of. And basically anything between that Baltimore-Washington corridor is really kind of our zone. And we have, like I said, those, we'll call them lifestyle markets. So, we frequently deal with a lot of waterfront buyers and a lot of waterfront buyers that have extra to spend and don't mind driving. They're probably going to go over to the Eastern Shore. You just get a tremendous amount of privacy there and a lot of acreage, so there is some upkeep there, but it's really just a beautiful setting. And you also will have buyers that come to us that if they want waterfront but they don't want to spend a fortune, also a subjective term, probably going to be coming to us and looking at stuff down in Southern Maryland. So places like Hollywood, Maryland, not that Hollywood, places like Lusby, where you can really get that, view that everybody clamors for, they all fight for, but you're not going to be paying $2 million for it. You might be paying $1 million. A lot of these places will go for less. They're going to need some work and at a minimum, some cosmetics, if not some structural repairs. But again, very similar to what you would find on the shore, incredible views. It's just, they're going to be all about the setting. And there's a lot of really fun communities that are down in Southern Maryland that have, a lot of really small town things to offer. Think of like every Hallmark movie you've ever seen. Boom. Now you're talking. So we'll call those our waterfront or our lifestyle markets, right? So those are the areas that we tend to focus on. Now, if we were to look back, we're in the first week of June right now. If you look back on the April 2026 numbers, they're going to tell a pretty clear story. Statewide, Maryland is not frozen. It's not crashing. There is none of that. We did have a very, very slow and stagnant February, and a lot of that has to be attributed to snow. So our region got blasted by snowstorms for honestly like 3 of the 4 weeks in February. So it really stymied a lot of the growth that we would normally see post Super Bowl. And that meant that come March and April, we were really expecting this big boom. And I think it was all really kind of delayed by about a month because of that February season being as stagnant as it had been. So if you look back at April, closed sales were kind of down a little bit year over year from 2025. Pending activity is up. Median price is basically flat. You're looking at days on market that are moving up a little bit from 9 to 12 days on market. It's a very specific kind. So you can kind of tell that, region-wide demand is there, and buyers are active, but discipline is back, right? And that's something that we've tried to hone in with our listings and sellers. We can't half-ass it anymore. There was a time, especially a couple of years back, honestly, God, you could put a sign in the yard, not even a sign in the yard. You could have had a child draw the house with crayon and put that thing in the MLS. It probably would have gotten showings and offers. So that market is no more. And I think for all the reasons that we've already stated, buyers are simply just not blindly chasing everything that comes up. They are really not going to be very forgiving right now, even if they are in a crunch, right? They're in a time crunch or they really have to move. And that's your market right now of people that it's really full of people that have to move. It's not the people that want to go and I feel like I could maybe, if I find something like this, I would really love it. That's not your buyers right now. You might have 1 in 100 that are buying something because they want to. The rest of the marketplace right now is buying because they have to. That means there's a divorce that's going on. There is, people getting married and they're really trying to combine, either trying to combine households, or they are having children, so they need more space, or they are sick of renting and they figured out that there's probably more advantages for their situation if they are not renting, so they're going to be buying into their first place, or their landlord has told them, hey, I got to sell, so you got X number of days to scoot out, and they're tired of renting. And we also have, unfortunately, people are dying too, and so you have the handful of estate sales that are happening, and so that's really your market right now, is people that have to move. You'll get your job reloads, your military PCSs, but even those buyers, for the most part, are not as forgiving as they once were, because things are very tight in the marketplace, and they're tight for buyers. So when buyers are going into a house, they are looking for excuses not to spend that money, right? That's the average buyer mentality right now. They're not treating every single listing like it's the only option that they will ever have. And that's not nuance. It's not a market where sellers should panic, but it's absolutely a market where sellers really have to focus on their execution. And locally, the differences are real. So in Arundel County, for example, again, that's our bread and butter. That's where I've grown up here. I've lived this market for 30 plus years, and we have had 1.9 months of inventory to about 2.3 months of inventory. And that's really been kind of our fluctuating thing for several months, definitely for the beginning part of this year. That means if there were no more houses to come on the market after today, it would take 2 months, basically, for the rest of the inventory that is out there, for all of the active inventory at today's current absorption rate, so how fast people are buying houses, to all be gone, so there's no more listings for people to buy. So that's what that means. If you were in a seller's market, that means that you're typically below 4 months of inventory. That means, generally speaking, sellers have a lot of leverage, which is also unique in this conversation. If you have between 4 and 6 months of inventory, you've got a market that is pretty balanced, and there's, a pretty fair market, let's say, and you've got the right number of listings, the right number of buyers. There's usually time between showings, and buyers feel like they have an opportunity to make a decision. They might have the opportunity to get some concessions. Sellers are certainly more willing to negotiate because they understand, if I don't, I'm going to be sitting on the market forever. And the best relationship in real estate is a short one. Okay. Remember that. Anything above 6 months of inventory is certainly, in our region, a buyer's market. That means the buyer is going to have the leverage 9 times out of 10, and the onus is going to be on the seller to find a way to make something work. And buyers have certainly more opportunity at that point. It means that there is a flush of inventory. We have not seen that kind of inventory around here in quite some time. At best, though, in some of these markets, you will see a little bit more balancing out, right? So a lot of our marketplace right now is going to be between that 2% or that 2 months of inventory. And every now and again, the shore is going to teeter, close to 4.5, maybe 5 months of inventory, depending on the market. So essentially what it means right now for Anne Arundel County, let's just stay there for right now. It's still tight. It's still fast. We're talking 7 days is the median days on market for April, April 2026. A good listing in the right part of Anne Arundel County is absolutely going to move. What's a good listing? We've already talked about it. All right. It's got to be, obviously, the age-old rule in real estate: location, location, location. It's in the right location. It's presented the right way. It's a product that looks polished. It's going to move. The market in Talbot County, conversely, around the same time in April, has had about 5 to 5.25 months of inventory and about 39 median days on market. That's a totally different seller conversation. Queen Anne's County has a different story again. So it's going to lead to a very different conversation. Calvert County has a very strong median price headline, but the days on market is going to, at that time in April of this year, it doubled from 7 to 14. So things are sitting a little bit longer. So when someone asks, how's the market, which is your typical, if you're a realtor, or you have a realtor in your life, I guarantee you, it's like, hey, how's it going? Hey, how's the market? That's usually the second question that you get. The answer is really not one sentence, and it's a tough thing to answer because the answer should be, which market are you talking about? What's the price band that you're talking about? What kind of property type? Which buyer pool are you interested in? Are you talking about waterfront properties or properties that are not on the water? Are you talking about updated places or projects? Are you talking about commuter houses or lifestyle houses or primaries or second homes? So it's a real conversation that you got to have. And sellers, and I totally get this as somebody who has to talk to them every day, they want a simple answer. Is it a seller's market or is it a buyer's market? Should we list now? Should we wait? Better question is, are we positioned correctly for the buyer who is most likely to buy this specific house? And I think if you can ask that question as a seller to your agent, or your agent can answer that honestly, that is really the game in the spring market of 2026 around here in the Chesapeake Bay region. It's not generic optimism. It's not, there's no fear mongering or anything. It's about positioning and coming up with a game plan that is very specific to the property. Timing still matters. And, I don't want to overcorrect and act like the spring market's meaningless. Obviously, it matters, right? It matters a lot. It's probably the most popular time for people to look at properties. And honestly, we talked about it at the jump, at the top. When you take a look at the water out there and you start walking around Main Street and the rest of Annapolis, you start driving over the Bay Bridge, hopefully not on a Friday afternoon. You start walking around Baltimore in the promenade. You start getting through some of the neighborhoods in Ellicott City when school is out and seeing all the people excited about the end of the school year and summer. It is awesome, man. The ice cream shops are rolling. You got kids gearing up for summer camps. It is awesome. It really is. It's one of the best places in the world that you can possibly live, raise a family, the whole deal. And on top of that, when it comes to property, you get more sunlight. Seems like a no-brainer. It's easier to be outside longer, which means it's easier to go look at places when it's not freezing frickin' cold out. You're probably a little bit more motivated to go out and look at houses. And the yards come back. You start seeing those pops of color again. That dullness, that depressing ass winter is behind you. And outdoor spaces really feel usable again. And then you start thinking about the entertainment, right? You start thinking about, oh my gosh, well, we want to have people over. I mean, when's the last time you watched a HGTV show and didn't hear somebody say, well, we like to entertain, but how many people have that outdoor space where they feel like they can entertain and be the house that everybody wants to go to? That's a little bit more rare, right? So you have that element during this time of year. You also have waterfront and water adjacent homes getting more of that emotional appeal, some of that draw, because bulk of our clientele that wants to be on the water, have that water view, and that emotional pull for them is a big deal. And it starts, really from April on to maybe October. It's really kind of your biggest push for a lot of the waterfront stuff. Conversely, you're also going to get a better view in a lot of these properties, in the other seasons. But the fact is, people start picturing boats, crabs, sunsets, patio dinners, summer weekends, runs through the neighborhood if they're active. They start thinking about what life would be like for them and their family, if they have one, if they moved to a different spot. And if they have kids, they want to do it before school starts. And that matters. Nationally, Realtor.com identifies April 12th to April 18th as kind of the best week to list. And that week's historically kind of had better pricing. You're going to get more views online, faster sales, fewer price reductions than the average week. But if you were to focus on the kind of Baltimore, Columbia, Towson metro area, and even the pockets that we've already discussed, the greater Annapolis pocket, that week can be anywhere from like March 15th to somewhere around May 15th. It's really dependent on schools, because a lot of our demographics that we represent are pretty school centric, and it's just going to vary by market. It might be more popular to go to private schools in one region than it is in another. But the important thing for our area is that because a lot of sellers think that spring starts when they feel spring, buyers often start a little bit earlier than that. I would say buyers start really hammering stuff right after the Super Bowl, because there's really no more after that Valentine's Day timeframe, and usually Super Bowl is the first week or second week in February. Right after that time frame, there's really no other distractions for them for a while, right? There's not really any major holidays. There's not really much to do. The best buyers are not waiting for the perfect weather to go look at places. They are waiting for the right house, and they'll know that it's the right house based on all the criteria that we've already set out. They're going to have their safe searches running. They're going to have talked to their lenders already. They're going to be pre-qualified. They already have a pretty good idea on the neighborhoods. They already know the school districts that they want to be in if they're school oriented. They know whether they want Annapolis or Severna Park or Arnold or Edgewater or Crofton or Kent Island or Easton or St. Michael's, Lusby, Leonardtown. They know what they want, and they are watching for those casual buyers get around to it and even wake up. So yeah, the spring window does help. It does get you more eyeballs. It can improve urgency. It can make that home show at its best. It can make your home show at its best. It can make a waterfront or water access property feel more emotional. But here's the key. Timing is really an amplifier. It's not a cheat code. If the listing is strong, timing can make it stronger. If the listing is weak, timing can kind of expose that weakness to more people. That's a seller mistake that we see a lot more than we'd like to admit. They think, well, we just listed in spring, right? We'll be fine. But they don't take all the precautions that we talk about. They don't get it ready. And spring is not going to save you from a bad price or from bad photos or a bad presentation, a bad smell. It's not going to save a house that feels like a project, but is priced like it's turnkey. But it will give you the stage. The question is, are you going to flop or are you going to flourish? So let's talk about pricing, because pricing is really where you're either going to create momentum or you're going to burn it. Let's think of pricing as the quarterback. Timing is kind of your home field advantage in the spring. Presentation, that's kind of your O-line. That's protecting you. The terms that you're trying to propose to buyers, that's special teams. It can win you games, but it's just keep it buttoned up for the most part, right? Documentation, that's your scouting report. Pricing is the quarterback. If the pricing is wrong, everything else has to work a lot harder. And it doesn't mean that you can't win the game. We see a lot of teams every year in the NFL or otherwise that have such a star-studded team around a crappy quarterback that they're able to overcome it. But to save yourself from having to do that, pricing it appropriately is probably the easier way to go. Now, when we talk about timing, time of year, sure. You're also talking about, how long is it incoming soon status? Do you have it launching at the right time? Are you able to get people in the door? So there's a lot of different aspects within timing, but for this conversation, take it as time of year. Presentation being your offensive line, that's your protection. Presentation you can think of in twofold, right? It's your digital presentation. How do we present online? How does the listing look? How do the photos look? How is the video? Do we put floor plans out there? Do we have a 3D tour for the buyers that might be military or relocating for a job, who can't maybe get out here right away, but they might have a friend who can make a decision for them that's local? Presentation on the digital landscape these days, you can kind of tweak things here and there and make things look really attractive. So that's where you're getting your first viewing. When somebody schedules an appointment to come see you, you should really think of it as a second showing. That in-person presentation is likely going to make the difference between them buying that house or not. Studies have shown that a buyer is going to know within the first 6 seconds whether they're buying that house or not. I don't know anybody that uses a spaceship to get to and fro listing tours, but they do use cars, and it's going to take more than 6 seconds to pull up to a place, get out of the car, and take a look at it. So curb appeal is huge. Make the investment. It is well worth it. It's probably the best bang for your buck that you can do as a seller. Invest in the curb appeal. That's going to be it for part 1. Stay tuned for part 2. Coming up.